integers. One of the most important things that you have to realize here, and we haven't really talked about terms yet, but when we get into the terms thing, we'll talk that when you multiply, you can multiply anything together. And that's a really big concept to grasp. So this means not only positives and negatives, but this means numbers and variables. You can multiply together. So again, if I have a variable, it doesn't matter if it's a variable with just the variable by itself, or if it's a variable with an exponent, like y to the fifth. Okay? How do I show a number times a variable? How do I know that I multiplied if I have one number and one letter in the problem? Well, that would be if I had multiple of the same variables. What if I have a number, though, 6 times y? How do I show that I actually multiply? I just write them together, right? So when you multiply anything together, you can just put the letter and the number together. And again, it's way better if I always put the number in front of the variable. When I do like this right here, 6y, what do I call this 6?
Base.
Try again. The base is only if we're talking about exponents. So you all were on that same, starts with the C. Something.
Coefficient.
Yeah, so this is my coefficient, right? And what does that mean? It's just the number in front of a variable. So again, why is this 6y? What's the coefficient in front of y? What if there's no number in front of y? I can always put a 1, right? And what's 6 times 1? 6, and then the y just comes along because we didn't have any other y's. But that's why you can do that, okay? So it's 6y. Don't fall asleep in the back. I gotta turn that off so we can throw down the light up there. Okay? So, biggest rule when we're talking about multiplication is that I can multiply anything together. Alright? So we had rules the other day when we were talking about addition or subtraction, right? There's 2 rules in this. You remember these rules? These rules are if the signs are the same versus if the signs are different. Does not matter in this case. When we talked about the signs being different the other day, we ended up talking about which one was bigger and which one was smaller, remember? Here, doesn't matter. If the signs are the same, we're then concentrating on the answer. If the signs are the same, plus times a plus or minus times a minus, doesn't matter. What is my answer? The answer is always positive. The answer is always positive. So this is a big difference from addition, isn't it? When we were doing addition, if the signs were the same, 2 negatives still had a negative. Well, now we're multiplying. 2 negatives is always a positive. So that's where your brain's got to click and make that switch. If the signs are different, positive times a negative or a negative times a positive, it doesn't matter which one comes first. It doesn't matter which one's bigger. My answer is always
Negative.
yeah. But this is a big difference between what we had talked about previously also. So we don't have to look at which one's even quote unquote bigger. We just know when there's different signs, it's automatically a negative. Okay? So we look at a bunch of examples. And then don't forget that we just multiply as we would normally multiply. And then we'll get into the variables here in just a second. So, 8. Here's the next thing, sorry. What are ways for us to show multiplication now? A dot. What else? Right next to each other. But if there's two numbers, we probably don't want to put them right next to each other, right? Because remember, if I wrote this, how many of us are going to really say that's 8 times -9? Probably not any of us, right? So how do I show this? What Michael said, right? Can use parentheses, or we can use the dot, or we can still use the X, but then it might look like a variable, right? So you got to really write a really small X, okay? And then if it has or includes a variable, then we can just write them together. Okay? So remember all those. So 8 times -9. Positive or negative answer?
Negative.
Negative, because why?
There's a negative in the problem.
There's a negative in the problem. So we get -72, right? Doesn't matter which one comes first. Okay? -8. Been using 8 a lot. Times -4. What do I get?
32.
Awesome. 32, right? So then we throw in some variables in there. And again, it doesn't matter. So, what's G times H?
That's the answer.
This is my answer, right? So the problem is the answer in that case. Exactly right. If I have a number, -7 times K.
-7K.
That's my answer, right? So the problem again is the answer. All right. If we have, what happens if I have -A times P? What's my answer? Negative AP, right? Still, if one's negative, the whole thing turns out to be negative. All right? But again, I can just put them all together. What happens if I have multiple numbers in a problem? So, -3 times -4 times 5. Here, you got two options to do this one. You can do this one by taking the first two and just doing them just like we've been talking about, and then multiply the third one using the rules. Or you can think about the signs first. If I look at this problem right here, I'm basically counting up the number of negative signs. And if the number of negative signs is an even number, my answer is what? Positive. If the number of negatives in the problem are an odd number, my answer is negative. Does that make sense? So in this one right here, positive or negative answer?
Positive.
Positives, because negative times negative is a positive, and then positive times positive is a positive. So, 3 times 4? 12 times 5?
60.
60, right? And again, when there's 3 or more numbers in a problem, remember I can rearrange the problem, right? So if I, for whatever reason, like to do 3 times 5, I can always switch them around. Because multiplication is one of those that we can do that property to, right? The commutative property where we can flip-flop them. Okay? How about this one? -8a times -3b.
24AB.
Perfect. 24. So we're doing the numbers. Negative, negative, 2 negatives make a positive. And then we just include the variables. And then the next step would be to include multiple variables, but we're not there yet, right? Then we can do the problem like we did at the end the other day, where they give us an expression, and we fill it in. Can I do that problem right there?
That's your answer.
That's my answer. But if we say if x equals -4 and y equals 9, now what do we get? So we replace everything, right? Remember, -3xy just means that we're multiplying everything together. So -3 times x is -4 times 9. Right? Positive or negative answer?
Positive.
12 times 9.
36.
Twelve
Wait.
times nine? Oh,
108.
108.
I thought you said 4 times nine. I was still right, I still don't think it's.
You're still right.
Yeah.
You
I
just
didn't-
didn't speak right.
Just did it in my head. I got 108.
Questions here? So, major thing that we're trying to accomplish with this is slowing down and thinking. That's the biggest problem with some of us in this class, we get going too fast. But remember the change of rules. That's the biggest thing, right? The change of rules between addition, subtraction, and now multiplication. Okay? Any questions? You want to see any more examples? Anybody?